Every now and then I make a video that asks more questions than it answers, and this is going to be one of those videos. You know, even though I could legitimately pass as an atheist, I do believe in gods. Here's a question to reflect on. Do we humans create the gods, or do we merely discover them? I think that we do discover them, and then we forget about them, and then we rediscover them. But we also create the gods in a sense, because we create problems in the first place. Universal problems and solutions are not something that humans just invent during some random brain-scrambling acid-induced hallucination. They're real patterns out there in the real world, just waiting to be discovered by someone who's sufficiently curious. A broken clock is right twice every day, and a brilliant solution can sometimes be a random fluke, but usually a brilliant solution flows naturally from a sufficiently thorough and accurate understanding of the problem at hand. Moral and ethical standards are not arbitrary. These are solutions that arise naturally from universal problems. If you have a problem, then finding just the right God for the job might just be your solution. What would Jesus do? People can become gods, or at least they can approach godliness. Anyone who demonstrates a way of acting and a way of thinking that is superior and unique will attract imitators and followers. People can embody an archetype if they understand the archetype and if they work at it. And this video is all about a particular archetype, the trickster archetype. The trickster loves to outsmart people and loves to show the fools how foolish they are and how easy it is to deceive them. The trickster is also very smart and very careful about not being fooled. I think that this trickster archetype can be used to solve certain moral and societal problems. Here is the problem that I see. The truth is well guarded and hidden by the powers that be. We want to uncover this truth. We want to spread the truth far and wide, and to do this effectively and efficiently. In today's zeitgeist, a trickster would likely be identified as a troll, or perhaps even as a terrorist, and then dismissed or censored. But a trickster is exactly what is needed today. For the purposes of illustration, I have two examples here of people who came really close to becoming the trickster archetype. John Lydon and Eric Wright. One of them created punk rock, and the other created gangster rap. These guys were master meme generators. Pretty much everything they said or did became trendy. For better or for worse, these two people are prototypes, progenitors, and godfathers. And if you trace a number of modern pop cultural memes and influences all the way back to their source, you will tend to end up at one of these guys. What do these two celebrities have in common? They're both brutally honest, independent-minded, curious, contemplative, visionary, very real, charismatic, tough, hard, fearless, opportunistic, good at thinking on their feet, persuasive, witty, good with words, good with catchy slogans, and good at being in the right place at the right time. They were both reluctantly coaxed into becoming the lead vocalist of a band, in spite of their total lack of so-called talent. However, their attitude and charisma compensated for their lack of so-called talent. Often mistaken for entertainers, these two were entrepreneurs and journalists first and foremost. They both had a special way of interacting with other journalists, with staying fresh and unpredictable, with creating interesting stories, publicity stunts, and promoting their own narrative, and with poking holes in the dominant narrative. Both are highly controversial figures. Both are often imitated, but never duplicated. Speaking of imitation, I've been noticing ever since the year 2000 that pop music has been stagnating. This is even more true now in 2015. Music has been changing gradually, but not in the same way that it was changing in, say, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and even in the 90s. On the one hand, there's been a lack of innovation, and on the other hand, there's been a lot of merging and cross-pollination between the various genres and subgenres. There's a massive project of assimilation underway. All of the distinct genres are becoming more and more similar and less distinctive over time, and no new styles have emerged. What we are left with is a mix of various stale, leftover, conventional punk rock and gangster rap styles, and quasi-pornographic pandering. Music has become fantasy-based and masturbatory. Innovation is being drowned out by the forces of imitation, fraud, and theft. When it comes to music, innovation is dead, and masculinity is dead. And I don't think this is a coincidence. All we have left is talent and training. It definitely takes talent to produce something that is somehow completely unoriginal, and yet totally new. It takes talent to produce something that is completely empty, and yet evocative. Taylor Swift is associated with that kind of talent. She epitomizes the modern music scene. She just borrows a few dozen of these little memes and ideas from all of the big hit songs of the previous couple of years and arranges them into a collage, and these Frankensteins that she puts together have even less coherence, meaning, and depth than the original pop songs that she rips off. Nothing about Taylor Swift is original, authentic, or even makes sense. When this recycling process is relied on too heavily, what you inevitably end up with is stagnation. The only artist who has made so much as a ripple in pop music has been Lorde, with her minimalist song, Royals. She wants to be a lord, so she named herself Lorde, but she added an E at the end to make it more feminine. And then there's Lady Gaga. She's weird, theatrical, and goofy, which is fine, but she's just not very original. Lady Gaga just follows the pop diva tradition already laid down by Gwen Stefani, Shirley Manson, Madonna, and Susie Sue. She's keeping the tradition alive, but she's not really shaking things up. In order to really shake things up, you need to have the mindset and the persona for the job. And then there's Kanye West. What can I say about Kanye West? I don't really think anything needs to be said about Kanye West. There's definitely something missing in modern pop music. Pop music could use a trickster or two. These two tricksters were both good at representing and promoting an ethic of realness and individualism. They've both achieved a high degree of uniqueness, distinctiveness, coherence, and simplicity. These are the guys who inevitably go against the flow simply by remaining in control of their persona and refusing to go with the flow. And they have the strength that is necessary to acquire forbidden knowledge and speak truth to power. Not everyone gets the message that these tricksters are sending out, though. These tricksters seem like a contradiction to many people. Some people just don't believe that these guys could be real. They pay attention to how distinctive and charismatic these guys are, and then assume that this somehow makes them artificial, fake, or just an act. Nobody could possibly be that real, could they? Nobody could have that much integrity. They must be manipulating people in order to get all the attention that they're getting. But yet, even though they are indeed manipulating people, they don't need to be fake or dishonest in order to manipulate people. They don't need to lie in order to grab people's attention and captivate them. The truth alone will suffice for those purposes. The truth alone will cause controversy and conflict. But yet, is there something fake about these tricksters? If you have a very carefully designed and constructed personality, Does that mean that you're hiding something? Does that mean that you're not true or real? I don't think so. The way I look at it, you have two options. Either you can take control of the forces that shape your persona, or you can just allow outside influences to shape you. Your persona can be actively constructed or passively constructed, but either way, your persona will be constructed and it will evolve over time. There's no such thing as your real, authentic voice. How do you think comedians and actors manage to do such realistic impressions of other people, in spite of the fact that they can't change their DNA? You can easily control the tone and pitch of your voice. Either you do this out of habit, or you put some effort into it. Either you do it subconsciously or consciously. The way you walk, the way you write, the way you speak, the words you use, even the way you think and the assumptions that you make are all somewhat under your control. Have you ever seen someone do a really good impression or caricature of themselves? That would be something to see, wouldn't it? It would be both effortless and impossible. I would love to see a talented impersonator do an impression of me. I might learn something from it. It's impossible to have the high level of self-awareness necessary to do a good caricature of yourself, but yet, just being yourself is really easy to do, and it requires no self-awareness. And if you want to play a character without becoming the character, then you need to take precautions to preserve and protect your memory of who you are right now. Otherwise, you will eventually lose yourself in a character of your own creation. If you don't put any effort into directing and managing your own persona, then you'll eventually just become the average of the people who you observe and interact with. Think about that hyper-feminine, flamboyant gay male persona. The effeminate, flaming homosexual man is emulating the personas of the women that he observes, presumably because he identifies strongly with women. When we see people who don't fit the stereotype, when we see a white person who acts black, or a black person who acts white, a male who acts female, or a female who acts male, many people are tempted to call this fake. I don't think that it's fake, though. Can you imagine what it would be like to just be yourself and have people accuse you of being fake all the time? Suppose that I started dressing like a woman, talking like a woman, and walking like a woman tomorrow, just for fun. And suppose that I started to like it so much that it just became me. Suppose that I felt more comfortable and more myself in my new character, and I didn't want to go back to the old me. Again, what this boils down to is that there are only two ways to construct a persona. Either you do it actively and consciously with some sort of vision, ideal, or goal in mind, or you do it passively and subconsciously as the people around you just gradually rub off on you. There's a good reason why people have this aversion to certain personalities who annoy them. Because they don't want those irritating personalities to rub off on them. They're disgusted due to fear of contagion. They don't want to catch that socially transmitted disease that some people wear as a persona. This is one reason for why having the power to choose who you associate with and who you don't associate with is so important to us. And this also fuels social ostracization, social aggression, and hatred to a large extent. For example, there's a type of woman who uses the word like more than 10 times per minute, who speaks twice as loud as she needs to, just so that she can reach more people, and who seems to be hitting that ultra-fake sweet spot right in between histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. I avoid these type of women like the plague. Why? Because I really don't want to become something that disgusts me. I don't want to be assimilated. I don't want to be bitten and end up as another zombie, or another werewolf, or another vampire. I mean, like, there has to, be, something to these, horror movie tropes. In my opinion, blending in and merging with the crowd can't make you more real. It is merely a sign of laziness and cowardice. But there's another reason that these two tricksters might be considered to be fake, because there's fake nice, and then there's fake mean. These tricksters are both extremely nice guys who are capable of being extremely mean. They don't believe in turning the other cheek, they believe in self-defense, and they put themselves in a position where they must constantly defend themselves. They dare to be different and to break conventions and taboos. They're constantly defending themselves and going against the grain, but that doesn't really mean that they're mean. On the one hand, you have the backstabbing false friend, the suck-up, the pandering prostitute, the teacher's pet, and the wolf in sheep's clothing. This is the kind of fake that is most common and most pernicious in the world today. Almost everyone praises and placates power. It is so common that you barely even notice it until you come across one of these guys, who will force you to notice it. These guys have a completely different kind of fake, which should never be confused with that other kind of fake. You have the soft tortoise who hides his vulnerability underneath a hard protective shell. Then there's the playful puppy who tests people, taunts people, and teases people, but doesn't really mean them any harm. And then there's the rattlesnake who rattles his saber just to say, "Don't tread on me," but has no intention of biting anyone, unless absolutely necessary. Which kind of fake would you rather see in your fellow man? I'm hoping that you agree with me. If you want to be free and honest in life, and if you want to promote honesty in general, then you also need to be a bit fake. You need to be the tortoise, the playful puppy, and the rattlesnake. Otherwise, honesty is just not sustainable over the long run. Meet the godfather of punk rock, Johnny Rotten. The Sex Pistols had their musical influences. There were plenty of similar entertainers before them. The Stooges and David Bowie came before them, and the Velvet Underground was probably the first to pioneer in that style of music. But the Sex Pistols were not mere entertainers. They were also rebel journalists who wanted to wake people up, shake them out of their complacency, speak truth to power, and overthrow the establishment. Johnny Rotten, in particular, was half philosopher and half comedian. Actually, he was all philosopher and all comedian. There's a lot of overlap between philosophy and comedy, and Johnny Rotten often manages to hit that sweet spot, which satisfies both criteria. Comedy, at its best, can be very deep and philosophical, and philosophy, when it's presented with just the right delivery, can be really funny. It's funny because it's true. Johnny Rotten provides food for thought that's both nutritious and delicious. At the age of 7, Johnny Rotten contracted meningitis, which put him into a 7-month coma. When he finally awoke, he had amnesia. He didn't recognize his own friends and family, and he had no idea who he really was. For him, it was necessary to learn about himself and to reconstruct an entire identity and persona from scratch. That's a good place to begin if you're going to carefully construct a persona, isn't it? The blank slate. How can you be anything but real if you don't know who you are? He could ask people that knew him before the coma what he was like, and they could tell him, but he had no knowledge of who he was. He also became very good at sensing dishonesty in people because he had no other way to tell if they were lying to him or telling the truth. The Bart Simpson character was based on Johnny Rotten. How many of you have seen the movie The Dark Knight? It's hard to deny that what made that movie so impactful was the Joker character, but what you might not know is that Heath Ledger based his portrayal of the Joker entirely on the persona of Johnny Rotten. Unfortunately, I suspect that he forgot who he was before he transformed into the Joker. The trickster is a powerful archetype, and I really do think that that's what did him in.
It was one of those moments where I was asked if I would be interested in playing the Joker, and I knew 5 seconds later exactly how to play it. And I sat down with Chris and shared my thoughts with him, and they were identical to his, and we just kind of went from there. when Chris came to me, and I knew how Chris was, he'd already set up the world for me. I'd seen what world it was that I would be playing in. So I knew it was open for a fresh interpretation, and I also instantly kind of had something up my sleeve, which happened to be exactly what Chris was kind of looking for. We sat down and kind of shared ideas, and they were the same, and so we just went with it.
Can you say how that something might differ from Jack Nicholson's portrayal?
How it will? You just have to check it out to find out the answer.
The Joker character is the trickster archetype, and he's invincible and brave because he has nothing to lose. He's free to be selfless and also free to be honest and free to be himself. The Joker character really was a heartless, psychopathic, murderous twist on the Johnny Rotten character. Without that twist, he would have been more of a hero than a villain. He was able to say such shocking things with a smile on his face and no hint of fear. He couldn't be intimidated or manipulated by people. He openly mocked the stupidity of everyone around him. He couldn't be sucked into getting emotional or defensive. He had nothing to defend. Why would he be defensive? He has no ego to protect or to have threatened. He's a formidable opponent of the established order, those dishonest, hypocritical schemers. Introducing Eazy-E, the godfather of gangsta rap. NWA had their musical influences. There were plenty of similar entertainers who came before them. Public Enemy and Run DMC came before them, and Africa Bambaataa was probably the first to pioneer that style of music. But NWA were not mere entertainers. They were also rebel journalists who wanted to wake people up, shake them out of their complacency, speak truth to power, and overthrow the establishment. Eazy-E himself was the definition of laid back and fearless. He was a true alpha male. In addition to his hard exterior, though, he also displayed kindness to everyone who knew him, as well as a childlike innocence and a sense of humor. Eazy-E was the kind of person who would always give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but he would never respect evil, dishonest, or fake people. Unlike the other rappers who worshipped him and copied him, Eazy-E was actually a gangster. He was a member of the Crips, and he liked to talk about so-called studio gangsters because, as the NWA brand of gangster rap gained popularity, he noticed that the majority of the music business were now catering to that gangster image in order to sell records. Eazy-E didn't see his life as a dope dealer, a thug, and a gangster as particularly glamorous or hip. It was just his outlet for entrepreneurship, for survival and to make money, and to gain knowledge of psychology, marketing, and economics. The strength of street knowledge. NWA popularized the use of the N-word and the B-word, as well as extreme violence and all the rest of that gangster rap fashion that we remember from the 90s. Eazy-E took the opportunity to pay $1,000 to join the elite National Republican Senatorial Committee Inner Circle and to have lunch with the President of the United States. Why? Because he had the good sense to know that he'd be able to use that situation to generate publicity. He was happy that the FBI was trying to censor his band. Why? Because he knew that he'd be able to use that situation to generate publicity. Instead of dressing up for the late-night talk show, he shows up in a bathrobe. Why? Perhaps why is the wrong question. When it comes to this trickster archetype, this why question seems very antagonistic. A better question would be, why not? This is the sort of person who tries a so-called strange or stupid idea that actually ends up working really well. This is the sort of person who is automatically wrong just because they're right in a time when everyone else is wrong. This is the sort of person who just acts and doesn't bother to explain why they're doing what they're doing, because they recognize that actions speak louder than words, and they understand that there's no point in explaining themselves to people who just don't have any desire to recognize or oppose mindless conformity. Either people will instantly understand and love what they're doing, or they never will. As I have observed, innovation has been really lacking in popular culture for the past 20 years. This could be due to the economics of innovation. It might be too costly and not rewarding enough. When you take away incentives to innovate through rampant fraud, theft, and imitation, you get less innovation, and men also become much less valuable. There might even be a biological reason for this. Testosterone levels have actually been decreasing by just over 1% every year for the past 25 years in North America. Male IQs have also been steadily declining. The average 12-year-old male today, who is just about to enter puberty, is about as smart as the average 8-year-old male was 25 years ago. This is making girls seem relatively smart, even though they're actually dumbing down as well. We don't know the reasons why these things are happening, but we do know that they're happening. These changes have occurred so slowly that most people have barely noticed them. And kids today don't remember what the world was like 25 years ago. We truly are living in a brave new world of stifling pretentiousness, conformity, and stagnation. We live in such a sick and sad world where "can I trust you" doesn't mean what it should mean. What it actually means is, can I trust you to lie to me? Can I trust you to lie for me? Where are the trickster gods when you need them? Who is holding them hostage, and how can we set them free?